I have found out recently that in addition to my William R. McGrain great-grandfather and my two paternal grandmothers have come from Winsted, and Joyce's great-grandmother, having lived for 3 years in the Gilbert home when very young, that my Sicilian grandfather's older brother Ralph, a mason, came to Winsted and married a Basetta and sponsored my grandfather Carmel Russo, a barber who also came to Winsted from Sicily, saved up for 2 years to bring my mother and grandmother over from Malta. Both brothers had a child while in Winsted and moved on to Hartford and one to Torrington. So Joyce and I have deep roots and many relatives and friends in Winsted. Many are dying now, but we always try to help those in need in the best way we can. We have always been that way wherever we have lived in this country and elsewhere. In order to solve problems as bad as Winsted's leadership and financial problems are becoming, and they are very bad and increasing at a rapid rate, you must first identify them, face them, and get them all out into the open for resolution. Ask any doctor. In our town, the very liberal Democrats and their supporters from whatever political attachment are the cause of most of the problems. There are many fiscally conservative Democrats that are not part of the problem, but are in the minority and getting more so each year. When Santa and the devil mention the Democrats, they are referring to the few extremely liberal Democrats that have the rest of the town fooled, not the fiscal conservative Democrats who have a lot to offer but can't get a word in edgewise, and are often shunned by their own liberal-controlled party. The United States was set up as a system of checks and balances, and it is important to hear all views. Because I do not rely on income from Winsted sources and have an educational business background and can handle abuse, I can study the town problems objectively and state my opinions publicly, as Ralph Nader would want me to do. Other very qualified people rely on jobs and social activities in Winsted, and as a result, cannot get involved as much as they and we would like them to. So I have studied the town since retirement for 15 years or so and understand not only the predicament that we are in, but how problem solvers work and what is needed in Winsted. So I am working to help others that are in need while I am still here. I don't expect to see any results for 10 to 15 more years, if not 20 more years, if at all. But if you have a disease, it must be addressed, or much worse results may follow. Ask any doctor. During this program, listen to Santa objectively, with these thoughts in mind. Along the way, I learned that there was an old Sufi saying. I learned this when I was in London. If you teach a man to fish, he will eat forever. If you give a man a fish, he may eat for only one day. So in my view, it's best to teach people to fish and not give them fish. Because we won't always be here to give them fish, but if we teach them to fish, and we are surrounded by lakes here, they will be able to eat for a very long time to come. The work that I have done in Winsted over the years has been my effort to teach people how to manage the town in a very effective way. And I'm hoping that some of the ideas sink in so that they can be prosperous in the future and won't starve because they won't have any fish to eat. This program tonight is dedicated to Bob Geiger of Barkhamsted, who has agreed to be the interim town manager until a permanent one is found. Bob should prove to be an excellent choice since he is a Harvard MBA with plenty of business experience around the world and some teaching experience too. Bob is very active in the area and should be able to help Santa beat the devil's influence in Winsted. Thanks for offering your help, Bob. You should be able to plant a few seeds over the next 4 months. Some may take root, some may not. And let's hope you consider taking the full-time job for the next few years to help everybody in our town. The 1823 poem by Clement C. Moore, A Visit from St. Nicholas, also known as The Night Before Christmas, or 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, is largely credited for the contemporary Christmas lore that includes the 8 flying reindeer and their names. Rudolph's story was originally written in verse by Robert L. May for the Montgomery Ward chain of department stores in 1939, 1 year after my birth, and published as a book to be given to children in the store at Christmas time. According to this story, Rudolph's glowing red nose made him a social outcast among the other reindeer. However, Santa Claus's worldwide flight 1 year was imperiled by severe fog. But upon going to Rudolph's house to deliver his presents, Santa observed his glowing red nose in the darkened room and decided to use Rudolph as a makeshift lamp to guide his sleigh. Rudolph accepted Santa's request to lead the sleigh for the rest of the night. Tonight I will be reading to you an interview that I recently had with Santa Claus when he was in Winsted, unbeknownst to most of the other residents. Santa, like most other people in the world, has fallen on tough times this year at the North Pole and really has to scrape by to make ends meet. Santa was thinking of standing on a local bridge, as Ralph Nader recently did, in an attempt to get publicity for his cause. But he and his team did not have enough time to spare before he returned to the North Pole to get down to business directing the preparation of everything for the Christmas Eve trip. There was a lot of work to do, much more this year than usual. Someone recently asked me how I knew that Santa was in Winsted. I answered, well, I heard that someone saw a miniature sleigh land on the roof of the local St. James Episcopal Church where the soup kitchen is housed. Someone woke me up with a call in the middle of the night and informed me that a miniature sleigh guided on this foggy night by Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had landed. I rushed down to the church on the rooftop, and lo and behold, when what to my wondering eyes should appear, it was Santa and Mrs. Claus, his elves, and all the 8 tiny reindeer: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, and Blitzen. And the son of Donner, or Blitzen, no one knows which one for sure, Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. I welcomed them, introduced myself. We proceeded down to the soup kitchen once it opened for the day. At the time, someone was bringing in free bread from the local markets. While delivering the bread, he was known to whisper, "No one ever thanks me for picking up the bread and bringing it to the soup kitchen a few times a week." He was assisted by a helper who plowed the snow from the roads to clear the way so the bread could be delivered on time, a few days each week. Once we were all inside and comfortably seated, the seating of the reindeer was very difficult, but we managed to seat them comfortably. I asked Santa why he came to Winsted so early. Why didn't he wait until Christmas Eve, as he usually did? Santa immediately stood to attention and said that although they were thrilled with the recent appointment of an excellent interim town manager, he and Mrs. Claus and all of his elves and reindeer were appalled by the recent Winsted election results, coupled with the latest awful announcement of the monumental task ahead to repair the damage caused by the Board of Education over the years to the Winsted Special Needs curriculum and its results and finances. "That was the last straw," said Santa. "It was breaking our resolve." Santa also said that Rudolph's guiding red nose began to blink on and off, and the 8 tiny reindeer were so upset by the monumental task announcement by the state-appointed school receiver CEO that they refused to eat for a week. Santa said that he and Mrs. Claus were both very worried about the 8 tiny reindeer's ability to recover in time for the annual Christmas Eve trip to hand out the many presents and many lumps of coal, as they didn't want to disappoint the people that have been very nice in Winsted this year. When I interviewed him after receiving his permission, the elves continued butting into the discussion, but thanks to help from the Charter Television studio experts, I was able to edit their jocular pestering out of this program. The interview with Santa lasted about an hour or so, because Santa, being so large, has a very large appetite, and the soup kitchen managers had a tough time cooking enough food fast enough to keep him up with the demand. They eventually ran out of food and had to run to the store for more. During the interview, Santa was also saying, "Ho, ho, ho," and slapping his knees a lot while spilling soup, ketchup, water, and tea many times all over his white beard and red and white suit. When Santa was finished with his explanation, I asked for permission to conduct an interview with him. I said, "Santa, would you consent to taking time for an interview with me for one of my present Charter Channel 191 television series programs?" Santa grinned as his cheeks became much rosier and his blue eyes glistened as he answered, "Of course, Brian. I have seen many of your TV programs on the very informative Charter TV channels, previously Channel 13 and now Channel 191 over the years when we are in the Winsted area, and on the Charter website, and or your postings on YouTube with Mrs. Claus, my elves, Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, and the 8 tiny reindeer that pull my miniature sleigh when we are at the North Pole and elsewhere in the world. I have also read all of your green and red papers presented at Winsted public meetings over the last 9 or 10 years, and we are all looking forward to reading your forthcoming articles and 2 books. After observing you and your many supporters in action, we at the North Pole think that you are one of the many very nice Winsted people and have always been seeking truth and honesty and financial justice for your ancestors, for your family, for your relatives, for your friends, and for the many other very nice Winsted taxpayers, very nice Winsted residents, and very nice Winsted children and grandchildren. You have also been constantly explaining over and over again why we all need to think big. We all need to get the word out and try to contain the costs instead of thinking small, as a minority of the not-in-my-backyard residents in Winsted seem to have a naughty habit of continually doing over many years. Their activity has ground Winsted into financial desperation, in my opinion. Maybe an interview with Santa will help the many very nice people in Winsted. I'll be happy to do an interview as a pre-Christmas gift from Santa and his team to the many very nice people in Winsted in the hopes of getting them to help us convert some of the few naughties that have been in control of your government in the management majority over the last 12 years or so to be very nice by next Christmas. The large amount of coal that I will have to deliver here this year is expensive, you know, and even worse, I have to buy it from the devil. I replied, Santa, thank you for your many compliments and for being so considerate, but no one pays any attention to me or the other very nice, knowledgeable, business experienced residents in town, as we are in the minority and outnumbered by the business inexperienced naughties and their many uninformed, misled supporters. But perhaps they will listen to you, Santa. It can't hurt to try. It's the American way. Ebenezer Scrooge eventually saw the light. Perhaps they will too. Santa was hugging Mrs. Claus and holding her so close she seemed embarrassed as I asked him the next question. I asked him again, Santa, why did you and your team come to Winsted so soon before Christmas when you could have found out most of what you wanted to know on the internet? I thought that you normally always traveled on Christmas Eve. Santa frowned for a long while, and tears welled in his eyes as he answered, Well, Brian, as you know from the North Pole and elsewhere, Santa sees all Winsted residents when they are sleeping, and Santa sees them when they are awake. Santa always knows when they have been naughty or nice, and I know if they have been bad or good. I didn't like what I was seeing from afar. I wanted to come here and see the happenings close up because the financial goings-on in Winsted and the state of Connecticut and the federal government are very, very hard for us at the North Pole to believe. What is your preference, Santa? I asked, between being naughty or nice and being bad or good. Santa couldn't believe my question. He was perplexed as he answered in total disbelief. Brian, I thought that everyone knew since early childhood that Santa wanted everyone to be nice, for goodness sake. I asked Santa, with all your years of experience coming to Winsted now and in the past and studying its history, do you think that this is a difficult and possibly dying former great factory town? Puffing out his chest and taking off his hat with his right hand briefly while scratching his head with his left hand, Santa answered, Yes, Brian, after visiting this town for a few hundred years, for Mrs. Claus's sake I don't say exactly how many years, and from studying the history written about this town in the past, I do believe that the town does show many signs of the advanced stages of a terminal disease. Yes, I believe that this may be a dying town unless the many very nice wake up, the few but powerful naughties, very soon. Free them from the devil's influence and help the nice to increase the town's grand list in a manner that allows you to invest in reconstruction and growth while allowing the residents to maintain a responsible standard of education and living. I then asked him, Can you cite your reasons for your gloomy beliefs, Santa? Rudolph and the others looked at me in disbelief, expecting a tirade from Santa as he answered. Yes, Brian, after much study, with my team and expert advisors with master's degrees and experience in business, I have many reasons, but time will only allow me to relate a few of these reasons. It appears that your town has lost a good deal of its advantageous tax base for many reasons over many years, aided by the catastrophic damage of the 1955 flood that wiped out a good deal of the local downtown recurring advantageous tax base. I would normally say profitable, but profitable seems to be a dirty word in Winsted. In addition to many other things dragging the town down as a result of the '55 flood, the state had to step in and help reconstruct Main Street infrastructure downtown, and that resulted in a loss of control for the town and the introduction of a 4-lane state highway running through the middle of Winsted's once valuable downtown. Many costly plans to improve on the downtown area over the years have not been implemented. It doesn't hurt Santa and his team, and we always land on the rooftops. They have recently made matters worse by adding a median strip that is difficult to transgress in the wintertime, to the frustration of the downtown business owners and the downtown residents. Soon after the flood, the factories did not need the water to run their operations anymore and began moving from Winsted to more economical towns, cities, and states, key personnel, and tax money with them. The railroad trains eventually stopped coming to Winsted, and the mass addition of cars and large heavy trucks have taken their toll on the infrastructure that was built for 80 factories and the support infrastructure that was built for 80 factories and the support entities for the workers' families, and it is now in a state of very expensive disrepair, to say the least, or not operating anymore. But Winsted still has a few in very conspicuous places when an inordinate amount of ground contamination that is very expensive to clean up, and the owners, future business prospects, town and state do not have the money to do so in this economy. The free and once regional and private Gilbert High School went broke for one reason or another in the late 50s after building a new expensive school and had to charge the Winsted residents and residents of other nearby towns for what used to be a free 9 to 12 grade education. As a result, many regional towns pulled out of Gilbert to form or attend more economic regional schools, leaving the ever-increasing cost per average student to the state and the Winsted taxpayers. In addition, your kindergarten through 6th grade test scores have deteriorated over the years to the point where they are now in the bottom 30% of test scores in the state. This hasn't helped, as more money is required to improve the test score results. You have received a 5-year grant of $1 million, $200,000 per year, from the state that the taxpayers or town may have to absorb when and if the grant expires and the extra costs remain. I could see that Santa was getting very tired now, but he managed to continue while leaning on one of his 8 tiny reindeers for support. He agreed to continue. Santa continued over many, many years. You have had many opportunities to add large, advantageous taxpayers in Winsted to help you with your financial problems, but your town has spurned them. Or they have spurned you for one reason or another. Meanwhile, others already here continue to leave. Over many years, Winsted's financial controls and financial checks and balances were so bad that your long-term finance director was jailed for 11 years for stealing money between $2 million and $7 million throughout the town finances for many years, despite advance notices in past annual audit reports to be aware of your financial department. In addition, the spendable portion of Winsted's fund balance has recently been depleted and is now at a level too low to borrow long-term money at reasonable interest rates, if at all, for the foreseeable future. Winsted is one of the 3 towns or cities in the state that has a semi-private school system that requires multiple support systems, such as 2 superintendents instead of 1, counting the town, 3 or more support systems such as maintenance, purchasing, receiving, and other departments. This is very costly. Your Board of Education has been reluctant to manage costs despite the reduction in the numbers of students attending the schools compared to much larger numbers in the past when the tax base could support them. In addition, your Board of Education has resisted suggestions by the Taxpayers Association and others to conduct a forensic audit on the school spending over the years, especially during the years when the school finance department was known to be very weak. Your schools have one of the strongest unions in the country, and the teachers have tenure making annual raises almost mandatory, and replacing weak teachers almost impossible, making it difficult to reduce costs. As I said earlier, Winsted's Board of Education has recently been paying little attention to the special needs children and the complaints of their parents to the Board of Education and the state. Winsted's school system has been overspending and not reporting and controlling their costs over the years. As a result, the state has recently instituted a new law signed by the governor that takes over your school system for 2 to 5 years, hired a receiver CEO who pushed aside the Board of Education, and placed the superintendent of schools on paid leave pending further study and introduction of better financial budgeting and expense controls. The receiver has recently surfaced the monumental task concerning the special education budget, accounting, and reporting procedures. I'm afraid of what inevitably will come next in your town, Brian. Your form of government has changed from a mayoral form in 1960 to a town manager form that, although it works elsewhere, doesn't seem to work in Winsted. Town managers have been changing on an average of every 2.5 years since the form of the government was approved by the voters. Many efforts to reverse the trend have failed. I said, "Santa, why are you stopping?" And he said he needed another rest and a good stiff drink. "You mind if I ask you for another very large glass of tea?" he said. Santa then took a much-needed 1-hour rest, snoring very loudly for a good portion of it, and eventually woke up and informed me that he was now rested and ready to resume the interview. Santa's team gathered around him for support, and he continued where he had left off, yawning and sipping water and tea at various intervals along the way, but because it seemed like the list of problems that he encountered in Winsted was going on forever. Santa said, "Your town seems to have a very strong difference in development philosophies between the rather well-off conservationists in the Highland Lake District and the town of Winchester and other parts of the city of Winsted. This approach has badly hurt the extremely needy and average income residents throughout the rest of the town and city. Your town has an election every 2 years for its major leaders and switches from opposing management philosophies and town managers as a result of each election philosophy switch. This revolving door approach is inevitable as each town manager tries to keep the job by pandering to the group in power and their supporters. And then it is difficult for him to change when their opposition gets into power. The law that your state has instituted requiring that towns spend at least as much on education each year as it spent the previous year is very difficult for you. The law is called the Minimum Budget Requirement, MBR. It can only be changed if approved by the state, but the Board of Education is reluctant to do so as they believe that more money cures all education problems and continue to press for increases that the taxpayers and the grand list can't afford. The percentage of taxes have been steadily increasing over the years, and it is now as much as 65% of the budget, further starving the town and the city non-school portion of the budget each year, and putting further strain on the taxpayers and infrastructure and other necessities. The well-meaning school teachers have one of the strongest unions in the country and have tenure after a few years, so they can never be laid off for poor performance. I suggest that might be part of the reason that the K-6 test scores are in the bottom 30% of the state's averages. In addition, your town leaders have not been increasing the advantageous portion of your grand list in conjunction with your expense needs caused by inflation and other reasons over the years. Your town has not been reducing unnecessary expenses from year to year in an attempt to balance your budget and keep your needs attended to. Your charter is disadvantageous and probably should be rewritten to help with your efforts to grow your grand list and balance your spending annually. I could go on, but time does not allow, and we have other work to do. Do you get the point, Brian? I said, yes, I do, Santa, and I hope that the listeners of this program will also get the point. But I'm going to now go on to another question. Santa, you have obviously done your homework and have a very good grasp of the town and its financial and educational problems. Do you have any ideas on how we can reduce the devil-supported very naughties and increase the very nice in Winsted now and in the future? It seems like the town has really dug itself into a hole with the help of the devil Democrats and the increase in computer technology over the years. Santa seemed prepared for this question and couldn't wait to answer. Of course, Brian, you must fix all these problems and many more that I haven't had time to mention by attacking as many as possible with the dreaded sound management techniques that you always profess and the town and city require. But it could take as many as 15 to 20 years, as government run by the elected, qualified, or not, works very slow. I then asked him, what techniques do you recommend, Santa? What will make you and your team happy and the devil sad? Santa replied, I can't suggest any techniques that you haven't already mentioned on your TV programs and in your green and red papers and letters to the local newspapers over the years. You have done an excellent job over the years. Perhaps your new interim town manager can begin to turn around, but that will be difficult, as he only has 4 months and the devil's disciples to contend with. If you don't hire a financially astute turnaround specialist as your new permanent town manager, your town may be doomed. I then asked, it hasn't done any good so far, Santa, because as you know, the devil and his Democratic disciples, their supporters and followers, have recently taken over the town once again, and the financially inept will continue to destroy our town and city by placing their supporters on the key committees and commissions. Santa answered once again, well, you are correct, Brian, and I'm sure that is much worse than I say. But we nice can never give up. Perhaps the state needs to take over the town too. So in Winsted native Ralph Nader fashion, I am here to make a list, and I'm checking it twice to find out in advance who has been very naughty and who has been very nice for our annual visit on Christmas Eve. I also want to see just how very naughty an influence of the very naughty devil and his very naughty disciple Democrats have been in the recent local election by deceiving the current and future very nice taxpayers, very nice town residents, and their very nice children and grandchildren. I then asked Santa if he had drawn any conclusions on what has been seen from the North Pole while there and what he has seen in Winsted over the years when seeking who has been naughty and who has been nice. Santa's elves began jumping up and down once again, whimpering and whispering excitedly. And Santa was hopping mad and knocked over a glass of water and a stale piece of bread onto the lap of Mrs. Claus as he answered, "Yes, Brian, you now have a tent city in your town. That's how bad it's gotten in Winsted. We have together determined that the election campaigning and the results attained by the naughty Democrats over the last 12 years or more, assisted by the devil and his assistants, were very naughty and present a very real long-term problem for the unsuspecting, very nice residents, nice children, and nice taxpayers of Winsted for some time to come. The Democrats and their supporters were very naughty indeed. I repeat, very naughty indeed." I asked him, "Well, Santa, what do you think we need to do to help Winsted out of its financial, educational, and infrastructural predicament that the devil and his Democratic disciples caused as selectmen, finance board, board of education, with the help of the state minimum budget requirement, coupled with the many state and federal unfunded mandates that have gotten us into this mess over the last 10 to 12 years?" Santa answered, "The main reason I am here was to accept advance deliveries of coal for the stockings of all the residents that voted for the devil's Democrats for the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and who neutered for 2 to 4 years the Board of Education, requiring the state to take over our school system." I said, "Santa, you and your team are very observant. Will you be bringing the naughty leaders and naughty voters in Winsted more coal this year for their stockings than usual?" Now he laughed voraciously as he answered, "Why, of course, Brian. We are trying to help by handing out a lot of coal to the very naughty leaders and voters in Winsted over the last 10 to 12 years. But the very naughty were so very naughty this year, and so deceitful, so underhanded, and so mean, that we have had to order tons of more very large pieces of coal from the devil than normal to be delivered to Winsted before Christmas, so that we can bring it all down the many chimneys with care on Christmas Eve and leave it in their stockings or under the Christmas tree for those that can afford one in this difficult economic climate." "Well, Brian, it's too much to carry so much coal by horse and sleigh from the North Pole to Winsted on Christmas Eve, so it must be done now. The coal is much heavier than most things, so the elves refused to agree to load the sleigh with that much coal, and the reindeer were against hauling it that much coal for such a long distance on Christmas Eve. We are accepting delivery now, and we will be back on Christmas Eve to hand it out on our rounds." I asked again, "Santa, are you implying that the devil wins twice in Winsted? Once with the Democratic disciples and their supporters and naive followers winning the majority on the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and Board of Education, and twice when he earns even more money on the large extra amounts of coal that you must purchase from the devil to fill the Christmas stockings of the devil Democrats and their supporters with care?" Santa was startled by that question, but he answered, "Yes, I never thought of that, Brian. You are right, as usual. It looks like the devil and his disciples are trying to destroy both Santa and Winsted. Santa for doing so much good for the very nice in Winsted and elsewhere, as the devil Democrats are doing so much for the very naughty in Winsted, the state of Connecticut, and the federal government by electing devil Democrats at the devil's command and with the devil's assistance. Brian, you are right again as usual. At this rate, the devil will continue to be the winner." I asked Santa, as you hand out all of that coal to the naughties in Winsted, are you also planning on rewarding the many very nice people in Winsted? He winked one eye as he answered, "Yes, of course, Brian, with sugar and spice and everything nice. And as usual, my advice to the very nice people is that you better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming to town." I'll be reading their letters to Santa, leaving some of what they asked for, and taking their gifts of milk and cookies for all of us to eat on the way back to the North Pole, and trying to please the very nice wherever possible. Santa then hollered to the 8 tiny reindeer, "Now dash away, dash away, dash away all." Santa shouted, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night," and left, headed for the North Pole. That was the end of the interview. I hope you learned something from this program. It'll be repeated a few times. Thank you very much. Epilogue. I would like to say that after I interviewed Santa and he returned to the North Pole to prepare for his return on Christmas Eve with gifts for the local naughty and nice over the past year, I received a call from a very perplexed Santa at the North Pole informing me that 2 new articles were published in the Waterbury Republican American after his departure that described some of the possible depths of the monumental task concerning the special education budget, accounting, and reporting procedures mentioned by Santa in my interview when he was here. Santa said that he and his team do not like to see delay, and he would like to see more progress sooner, as he cited the contents of the 2 articles. "Brian," Santa said, "the first article stated that the State Department of Education is not ready to appoint members to the state receiver's 7-member advisory board, and that Receiver CEO Robert J. Travellini has already recommended 4 professionals to serve on the advisory board. But the state has not yet solicited applications from the public to serve on that board. As we know, 3 residents can serve on that board." The second article explains a lot of the Board of Education mischief and is even more perplexing, but not unexpected. The headline reads, "Winsted tagged for the worst," with a subtitle, "Receiver says 25 school network qualifies for additional aid." The article is too long to read here, Brian, but it starts out by saying, "State Receiver CEO wants Winsted to join a network of the worst performing districts in Connecticut." Can you believe that, Brian? Possibly one of the worst performing districts in the state. Although it doesn't qualify under the state's commissioner's guidelines, the CEO is making the request as a district that is under receivership. The article says that the state law was made effective in 2013 as a way to provide new resources and flexibilities to improve student achievement in the state's lowest performing schools. The schools, in partnership with the state, must develop plans that include intensive and transformative strategies that are necessary to turn around schools that, to date, have been unsuccessful in their improvement efforts. This is hard to believe, Brian, even for optimists like Santa Claus. The devil has done a fine job here and should be recommended for his ability to fool the voters for so long. The article also says that such schools remain part of the network for 3 to 5 years. First, the state will send 3 qualified people to conduct a what's needed audit to evaluate the district's instructional, managerial, and operational procedures and provide feedback on what is working and what is not working. Then they will begin the process of development that has already begun by the state takeover of the schools and Mr. Travellini's appointment. The receiver CEO wants to provide teachers with professional development in lesson design and lesson planning, instruction, and implementation that will integrate with work already underway by the receiver. Brian, this mismanagement appears to have been going on undetected for many years. The boards of education over the years have been quite devilish. The largest lumps of coal will be well deserved there on Christmas Eve. And Brian, more money required from the state and perhaps in the future from the taxpayers if the minimum budget requirement is raised as a result. Can you believe that, Brian? The article says that the district, if accepted, may submit a bond request for up to $500,000 for capital improvements and technological investments. Up to $100,000 is available for social and behavioral support systems and will continue to receive the separate state grant for being in the bottom 30% of state schools. As we know, Brian, that is $200,000 per year for the next few years. What a revolting development this is turning out to be. The CEO says that he is applying for 2 technology grants and a 2-year capital improvement grant that would, if awarded, give the district $1 million per year. This, if it happens, will allow the CEO's administration to replenish accounts where money was transferred out to make up for shortfalls elsewhere in the district's $20 million annual budget. Santa was furious now and sneezed a few times as he tried to say coherently, "Brian, it looks like this whole situation is much worse than thought. It looks like there has been a severe management problem over the years that now takes multiple state grants and a what's needed audit to evaluate the district's instructional, managerial, and operational practices and provide feedback on what is working and what is not. Nice and naughty." And the receiver CEO wants to provide teachers with professional development in lesson design and lesson planning, instruction and implementation that will integrate with work already underway that will take, if accepted, 3 to 5 years and cost the state about $1.7 million per year. Brian, where does it all end? I guess I'll have to order a lot more lumps of coal from the devil and get it delivered quickly to Winsted to hand out to the extremely naughty on Christmas Eve. Santa then said, "I will see you all in Winsted on Christmas Eve," and slammed the phone down in disgust. On Christmas Eve, if I can stay awake long enough. Let's see what news the new year brings. More nice than naughty? I hope so for Winsted's sake. As Sherlock Holmes would say, lots of lawsuits, I presume, dear Watson. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night from Brian O'Haron. See you next year. That's it.